For decades, she seemed untouched by time. That laugh, that voice, that effortless charm. To millions, Diane Keaton wasn't just an actress. She was feeling a living symbol of confidence, wit, and grace. But what the world saw wasn't the whole story. Behind the laughter was silence. Behind the camera flashes, solitude. And behind that radiant smile, a woman quietly fighting her own battles, far away from the world she once lit up. They called her timeless. They said she never aged, never faded, never faltered. But the truth is, time comes for everyone, even for those who seem immortal. In her final years, whispers began to grow. She looked thinner, quieter, distant. Not broken, just human. The kind of human that Hollywood rarely lets you be. Diane had always protected her privacy fiercely. No scandals, no confessions, just art, laughter, and elegance. But when news of her health struggles surfaced, it wasn't just shocking, it was disorienting. Because Diane Keaton had never allowed the world to see her weak. Maybe it wasn't pride that kept her silent. Maybe it was a purpose, a quiet choice to live and to leave on her own terms. In a world obsessed with youth and noise, she chose peace. And that peace, now, is the mystery everyone is still trying to understand. Behind every smile is a story the world was never meant to hear. Before she was the woman in the white suit. Before Annie Hall changed everything, there was just Diane, a dreamer from Los Angeles, born to a mother who filled her world with stories and light. Her mother, Dorothy, was a homemaker and amateur photographer. Gentle, creative, endlessly curious. Her father, Jack, worked in real estate, practical, grounded, and protective. Between them, Diane learned two things: how to dream and how to stand alone. As a teenager, Diane fell in love with performance, not the fame, but the feeling. That spark when the curtain rose, when a line of dialogue made someone's eyes change. She wanted to live inside that moment forever. She wasn't the most confident girl in school. She once admitted she was shy, awkward, and never quite sure where she fit. But when she stepped on stage, something shifted. It was as if she finally recognized herself. When she moved to New York in her early 20s, she carried only two things: a suitcase and an unshakable belief that she could become. She studied at the neighborhood playhouse, learning the craft, struggling to pay rent, waiting tables to survive. But she never let struggle turn to bitterness. Every rejection was just another rehearsal for success. And then came Hair, the Broadway musical that changed her path. She didn't just act, she owned the stage. People noticed her uniqueness, the voice, the eyes, the presence that couldn't be copied. She wasn't the polished Hollywood type. She was raw, real, unpredictable. And that made her unforgettable. It was here that the seed of independence took root. Even as others chased approval, Diane chased truth. She didn't want to be perfect. She wanted to be honest. And that honesty would soon turn her into one of the most original voices Hollywood had ever seen. Hollywood in the 1970s was a storm. A world of power, beauty, and fragile dreams. And in the middle of it all stood a woman who didn't look or act like anyone else. Diane Keaton wasn't trying to be the next Marilyn or Audrey. She wasn't even trying to be famous. She was just trying to be real. She started with small roles, quirky, offbeat, unforgettable. Her voice had a rhythm of its own. Her smile felt improvised. She could turn a pause into poetry. When Woody Allen cast her in Annie Hall, the world met a new kind of leading lady. Messy, funny, shy, smart, spontaneous. And the clothes she wore, men's jackets, loose ties, baggy trousers, weren't costumes. They were hers. Authentic, comfortable, unapologetic. For the first time, millions saw a woman who didn't need to be perfect to be powerful. Diane Keaton became a mirror for every woman who ever felt different. cut to interviews of younger fans from that era. Smiling, inspired. She won an Oscar for Annie Hall. She became the face of originality, a fashion icon, a critical darling. Every director wanted her. Every magazine wanted her face, but fame is a strange companion. As her career soared, her world grew smaller. Her circle tightened. She guarded her privacy like a secret she could never share. Behind the camera, Diane was gentle but distant. Friends would say she was warm but careful. A woman who gave pieces of herself, never the whole. Success didn't make her feel invincible. It made her feel exposed. Hollywood had built her into an image. The charming eccentric, the forever girl next door. But she was more than that. She was a thinker, a collector, an artist, a woman with fears she didn't like to name. She once said in an interview, "People think if you're famous, you're happy. But fame is just another room you live in. It has windows, but no doors." Those words weren't cynicism. They were truth. She had built a life on screen that people adored, and a world off screen that almost no one ever entered. Still, she kept creating. Reds, Manhattan, Something's Gotta Give, The Family Stone. Each film is a new layer of herself. The romantic, the dreamer, the rebel, the survivor. Every role seemed to be a confession disguised as comedy, a truth hidden in laughter. The world saw the sparkle, but not the shadows. Because Diane Keaton was never acting to escape. She was acting to understand. And maybe that's what made her unforgettable. Her art was never about perfection. It was about being real, messy, brave, human. In a city obsessed with perfect love stories, Diane Keaton chose none of them. She never married, never stood in front of a crowd and said, "I do." In a place where fairy tales are scripted, she wrote her own ending, one that didn't fit the rules. When a reporter once asked her, "Why did you never marry?" she laughed, as if the question itself was too small for the answer. "Because I don't think I was built for it," she said. "I like being alone." The crowd laughed too, but there was a silence behind her smile. To some, that answer sounded like strength. To others, it sounded like sorrow. In the 1970s and 80s, everyone assumed Diane Keaton would marry one of the greats. She dated Al Pacino, her Godfather co-star. She was linked to Woody Allen and Warren Beatty, two of cinema's most influential men. Each relationship made headlines. Each seemed like it could end in a walk down the aisle. But each ended with the same quiet, Diane walking away. The tabloids wrote their theories. She's afraid of commitment. She's chasing independence. But maybe it was simpler. Maybe she was chasing herself. "I just never found anyone I wanted to live with forever," she once said. Then paused, smiled, and added, "But I've found a lot of people I've loved." That line, honest, imperfect, summed her up entirely. But the truth wasn't all glamour. In her later memoir, Then Again, Diane admitted something raw. "I wanted to be loved. I just didn't want to disappear into someone else's life." That sentence reveals everything. Diane Keaton was the woman who gave the world love stories, but refused to lose herself in one. Through her characters, she explored every version of love. Hopeful, broken, unspoken, and audiences felt seen because she didn't fake it. She played women who were allowed to be uncertain, messy, and afraid. She showed that solitude isn't failure. It's a choice. By her 50s, Diane had adopted 2 children, Dexter and Duke. No husband, no traditional family, but a home full of laughter and art. She called it her real love story. "Motherhood taught me what love really means," she said. "It's not about possession. It's about presence." Her independence wasn't rebellion anymore. It was peace. In a town where women were often defined by who they married, Diane Keaton defined herself by who she became. She had fame without scandal, success without surrender, love without labels. And yet, Even in her 70s, interviewers kept asking the same question. Do you regret never getting married? Her answer, as always, came with a wry grin. Not really, but I do miss having someone to take out the trash. That was Diane. Funny, sharp, real, turning a lifetime of choices into one effortless punchline. But between the jokes and laughter, there's a subtle truth that independence has a cost, that silence has an echo, and that even the strongest hearts sometimes wonder what could have been. Maybe that's the mystery of Diane Keaton. She gave everything to art and nothing to expectation. She didn't reject love, she just redefined it. Diane Keaton's final chapter was not marked by scandal or spectacle, but by silence. The kind of silence that hides more than it reveals. For most of her life, she had been open about nearly everything: love, fame, fear, even aging. But when her health began to change, she withdrew almost instinctively. Friends noticed she was thinner, quieter, and more private than usual. There were whispers, soft and uncertain, but no one truly knew what was happening. The truth is, Diane had always controlled her own narrative. She built her career on honesty, but she also knew that transparency has limits, that the public's curiosity could easily turn tenderness into intrusion. So, as her body began to betray her, she chose to disappear behind the grace she'd mastered for decades. Her decision to sell her Los Angeles home took everyone by surprise. That house was her masterpiece, a living canvas she had spent nearly 10 years designing. It was more than a home. It was the physical embodiment of her creativity, her independence, her taste. But quietly, she listed it for sale, as if she were preparing to let go of the physical world she had built so carefully. Those closest to her said she had been facing a progressive illness, something that came swiftly, taking her strength in quiet increments. She never announced it, never wanted sympathy. Even her friends, people she'd known for decades, later said they hadn't realized how serious things had become until it was too late. There's a haunting beauty in that kind of secrecy, the way she protected her dignity to the very end. For a woman who had lived in the spotlight for 60 years, her final act was one of complete withdrawal. No public hospital visits, no last interviews, no final words for the press. Only family. And the silence she had always found comfort in. When the news of her passing broke, the world reacted with disbelief. She was supposed to be timeless, one of those rare stars who never truly aged. For millions, Diane Keaton represented the idea that you could grow older without losing your spark, that laughter and self-respect were stronger than time. And suddenly, she was gone. Hollywood's tributes came fast. Friends, co-stars, and fans filled social media with black and white photos from Annie Hall, Something's Gotta Give, The Godfather. Each image was like a piece of her essence, clever, elegant, sincere. Al Pacino, who had loved her quietly for years, simply said, "She was the soul of Kay, and she was the soul of me." But beneath the mourning, questions lingered. Why didn't anyone know? Was her silence an act of pride or protection? Did she hide her illness because she feared pity, or because she wanted to leave the stage on her own terms? It's impossible to say for certain, but what we do know is that Diane Keaton lived and died exactly the way she wanted, with intention, mystery, and grace. She never wanted to be a symbol of tragedy. She wanted to be remembered for her work, her wit, her honesty, the things that made her more alive than most people ever managed to be. In her book, she once wrote, "Aging is not about loss. It's about becoming more of who you already are." Those words feel prophetic now, as if she had already made peace with the idea that the end isn't something to fight, but something to understand. Diane Keaton's legacy isn't defined by how she left, but by how she lived. She showed generations of women that solitude isn't loneliness, that love doesn't have to be defined by marriage, and that growing older can be both brave and beautiful. She taught us that self-respect is not arrogance, it's survival, and maybe that's why her story still lingers. Because in a world where every moment is broadcast and every secret is sold, Diane Keaton reminded us that some things are worth keeping to yourself. She once said, "I've never been interested in being perfect. I just wanted to be honest." That honesty, raw, human, fearless, is what makes her eternal. In the end, Diane Keaton didn't fade. She simply stepped off stage, quietly closing the curtain herself. The world kept watching the empty spotlight, still waiting for her to reappear, but she never did. And maybe that was the point all along, to remind us that even the brightest lights can choose when to dim, and that grace, in its truest form, is knowing when to let go.
Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into Hollywood's hidden history.